Thanks for having me. My name is Jawa Choi from George Washington University, and today I want to share some project I'm working on it. What's name is entitled as Digital Knowledge. Subtitle is Machine Education for Human Learning. All right, I want to talk about some background related to human knowledge and technology. All right. This statue, the name of this statue is Torch Bearer. And this torch represents the knowledge we are transmitting from the current generation to next generation, right? So whenever we talk about that this torch represents knowledge, and that we are thinking about the books, right? And that we are learning from books, and that we are teaching the utilizing this book, which is the best representation of expert knowledge, right? So called, sometimes we call it a knowledge representations, right? Of the expert. Um, and then we are teaching and learning with those knowledge representations and are developed by expert, right? And then in digital era, and we are thinking about digital books, and then nowadays websites and some kind of applications, and then they sometimes they are nearly same as the paper version of books, right? Which is knowledge representation, right? But technology changed lots of things, and then obviously also changed the thousand years of our experience and the how we learn how to teach and how we transmitting our knowledge to from this generation to next generation. That's the central theme of the today my presentation. Before we moving on to the next step, let's talk about the Google search engine. And the search engine is there's so many information in the digital world, right? And then it works as a kind of map for digital information. However, and then the large database, right? And then basically they're indexing all those digital information and then provide us what information we are looking for locate in where, right? However, the technology I just did presented to you is not a 21st century technology. It's a 20th century technology. We already know, oh, Google has been a great company for the last decades, right? So what's going on right now? Which is innovation in the medium of knowledge transmission or innovation of the medium of knowledge, um, the the digital transformation of the knowledge itself, right? So we call it as a digital transformation of knowledge. Because we are educator, we are education experts because of that region, and then this digital transformation of knowledge is very important for us because knowledge transmission is one of our mission as educator, right? In order to understand the digital transformation, and then let me break it down a couple of digital transformation waves, right? The first waves, and then we want to talk about the digital machinery. Digital machinery is different from previous machinery, and then we start to developing digital devices, so-called the computer as a first wave, right? Second wave is internet and mobile, right? And the last few decades, and then we start to having high-speed internet, and a lot of devices start to connect it to this internet, so-called hyper-connected society, right? And then currently 2020, and then we are experiencing this digital economy transformation. So for example, Bitcoin or NFT and metaverse, right? And all those technologies are start to impact onto economy is transformed from analog world to the digital world. Next wave, I am thinking about it maybe 10 or 20 years later, or also influenced onto nowadays is digital knowledge transformation or knowledge transformation. First wave, second wave, and third wave, we already know it. And then fourth wave from analog knowledge representation, which is book, right? And then we will transform those conventional analog knowledge representations to digital knowledges for generating digital contents and services. The key differences between the conventional practice is we are not uploading or delivering the human generated knowledge represent knowledge representation. I'm talking about how to program machine knowledge to let machine can generate digital content and knowledge, specifically educational content and knowledge. So generating is the keyword in this case. Some people call it as artificial intelligence. I want to call it as a digital knowledge for a couple of reasons. So, all right, that's something going on right now. And what's wrong, right, in specifically in educational area? Educational area is Galapagos syndrome in digital transformation education. Because out of the many sector, education is the lagged and the slow, and then digital transformation in education is going somewhat weird way compared to another industry or another area. That's I want to point. That's the syndrome, and I want to pointing out specifically specific to education field. I want to talk about this issue, educational outcome over high SES group and low SES group, and we everybody know there's gaps between learners pupils educational outcome gap between high SES and low SES, right? But with digital technology and content and service, and without and with digital content and services, and there's some phenomenon, the gap getting wider because of digital technology. So instead that we are utilizing technology as gap diminisher or gap minimizer, right? And then it turns out, and then the technology, because of the technology, the gap gets bigger, wider, right? So we call it as digital technology as educational gap increaser, right? Tech divide getting worse in educational outcome gap, right? And then also the other scenario is technology dependency and locked in. Think about the phenomenon, what's going on around us. Big tech company, right? And then they are developing reasonably cool technology for teacher. And then big tech company, they also provide centralized assessment, materials, and everything. And the teacher, right, getting a weaker over time. Instead of that, they're getting a stronger to become a owner and then become an agent in the classroom, and then their ability to dealing with students and working with students getting a weaker, not necessarily they're getting a stronger. Why? Because big tech companies software and a lot of device and taking care of lots of work, historically teacher has been done it. That's a problem. And then also that lock in, right, make entire teacher and educator as less independent. The more dependent to the technology and the more data dependency to that big tech companies, right? And then that big tech company never released their own data and our learning data, even though we had a what ownership of those learning data, right? That's a problem, and I want to pointing out, especially when we face with this digital era of education. And then pandemic make these things really, really seriously getting worse. right? All phenomenon I pointing out, problems I pointing out, has been around us before, but that becomes getting worse. So what? So what should I do? Right? This is a picture and 1900, right? And that they expect what will be going on in 2000, right? Around 120 years ago, right? A person in France, right, expect this will be, classroom in 2000, right? Which is very nice. The job this professor looks like, right, a lot older than me right now, but this work, which is grinding paper book into the machine and transform those paper knowledge, the knowledge representation, right, in the form of paper, transform into digital form and delivery. Nowadays they don't have any Wi-Fi, and then this is like, everything's wired, right? And then directly into students' brain. The machine digital knowledge I am working on it is exactly same as this one, except couple of this Wi-Fi, wireless scenario, right? Yes, it is digital knowledge what I'm developing, and specifically, this digital knowledge is what for human learning, and the method of developing this digital knowledge I call it as a machine education. We are educating machine for human adaptive learning, and that the thing what we are developing is I want to call it as a digital knowledge, right? So a human learner, and then we had a human expert educational expert, right? And we've been teaching to next generation human learner in analog world. All of a sudden, last 30 or 40 decades, right? Specifically now, they're like 20 decades, right? And digital route has been emerged because digital world has been what? This come to our life, not only analog world and the digital world also, right, come to our life. So this process, we are developing knowledge system into the digital world, and I want to call it the machine education. Let's educate machine, and then the educated machine, i.e., digital knowledge, and also support digital learning for human learner. So now we have a two different way to teach or educate next generation humans. One analog as it is, and then also the other route, which is digital route, which is digital through digital learning. So I want to call it as a digital knowledge transmission triangle. There's just some technical, details I describe in terms of modeling and other aspect, but this concept is much more important. And I want to explain what is digital knowledge in the digital world, right? The problem is this: blind man and the elephant, because I have to, or we have to develop some elephant nobody's seen it before. And then also this elephant is what? Digital elephant. So we can't see it. It's similar to Bitcoin, right? Oh my God, I can't see the Bitcoin. I know the price of Bitcoin, but I can't see it. And only technically savvy people understand that code, right? Even somebody give it to me that code, I can read it, even though everything's perfectly mathematically works, right? I am facing exactly same scenario. Hey Jehwa, digital knowledge is what? So conceptual. And I don't understand. Why? Because I can't see it, right? So that's the reason why we have to using our intellectual ability try to understand what is this knowledge in detail. In order to understand the digital knowledge and the knowledge modeling or program knowledge, right? And then we need to think about this one. Since machine has been developed, and then we call it as that machine as a computer. The reason why we call it as a computer is we primarily use that machine as a computing. However, we also can use those machines as a knowledger. What do you mean by knowledger? Knowledger is we can use it as that tool as representing our knowledge. Let's use it this digital technology as representing our knowledge and modeling our knowledge. So I want to call it as a what? Instead of computer, let's use machine as a knowledger. Knowledging itself is what? Programming paradigm for both declarative and procedural knowledge. So there's two different knowledge, which is declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. And then how about we just program those knowledges to let machine to generate all those, and digital learning contents and services, specifically adaptive learning contents and services, right? Conceptual layer, it is a programming techniques, and then it's a computerizing programming modeling. Specifically, we call it as what? There's many different type of program, right? And then this program is knowledge modeling or knowledge engineering. Specifically, there's a many type of knowledge modeling, and this knowledge modeling is what? Assessment engineering for adaptive learning, or assessment knowledge engineering, or assessment knowledge programming. And then inside of this modeling, and there's a generative psychometric modeling, we are using psychometric model to generate items, exams, and the learning contents, right? So technically, we we are we can describe the relationship as this different type of conceptual layers. Humans are primarily conducting, I mean, we know we do tacit knowing, right? According to Polanyi tacit dimension, right? And the only very little part of our knowing can be explicitly represented. And then that dimension also decompose into internal dimension in our brain and external dimension we represent outside, right? So internal explicit representation, we call it as Anderson, our cognitive scientist, call it as internal knowledge representation. A some kind of device in our brain, we are utilizing that kind of frame, right, to in order to processing information and retrieving information and the solving problem. In extreme case, right, it is possible to take that internal knowledge representation out of our brain, for example book, right? Or note, right? Or diary, right? Or drawings, right? A some kind of knowledge we able to explicitly externally represent. And though every what we developed, right? Um, what we made, and then we call it as what? Human friendly external knowledge representations. Every books are belong to type of in here, right? And then there are related to each other, right? Obviously, internal knowledge representation and external knowledge representations are closely related to each other. And then historically, this knowledge representation, for example, books exist in analog world, right? But what happened last few decades? We start opening up the digital world. In the digital world, now our job is what? To make symbolic manipulation ready and increasing ontological property. What do you mean by ontological property? Which is strong semantic expression and inference engine ready, right? And we are transforming this analog external knowledge representation to machine friendly knowledge representation. This process, I want to call it as what? Knowledge modeling, program knowledge, right? So we need to have a book to program. So basically, we are programming based on the what knowledge representation we already developed, but everything is analog. We want to develop in the digital world. And then utilizing this machine friendly knowledge representation, which is knowledge models, as entry for our knowledge base. And then based on that knowledge base, we start to helping students and teacher, right, in adaptive learning scenario. Classification, we are using these digital contents and services for the classification of the learning, generalization of the learning, and the reinforcement of the learning. Because the machines are so fast and then accurate, and then they remember nearly everything. And then if we work hard for this part, and the machine generated content and service will be as good as human created. That's the whole point of the what? Knowledge modeling. And then we start to link all those different model and then in detail, item model, task model, calibration model, and then we develop generative psychometric model as a baseline. And then we adding knowledge based on the knowledge model bank. And then also we adding adaptive generation model on the top of this generative knowledge modeling. And then we also adding learning progression model, right? And connected. And then every data start to, and all models are connected to each other, and then data start to flow into the models. I call it a digital knowledge model chain. Models are linked each other as if chain, and then digital data, as a flow into all those different models. And then we are using rule-based deductive modeling not only for the that parts, we also using data-driven inductive modeling as well. So this is combination of deductive data-driven modeling and inductive data-driven modeling and the rule-based, knowledge-based deductive modeling at the same time. Then what? Okay, after you develop, what happened? And then content and usages. And then we start using this one, the summative assessment. For example, testing, online testing. And then we are utilizing this digital knowledge for the formative assessment or assessment for learning. And then we also utilizing this one as adaptive learning analytics, which is very similar to the formative assessment, right? And then also we are using educational expert development, teacher development. We are utilizing this digital knowledge for developing teacher, training teacher in future teacher, right? And then we are using analytical and creative thinking development as well. And the agencies and activity, who's going to use it and how they are using this one. And teacher education program, obviously we are using. And then also in-service teacher community, and then they can utilizing this digital knowledge. And extracurricular activity for the learners and the students can use it, this one as extracurricular activities. And then gifted education programs are very interested in utilizing this digital knowledge because developing knowledge model itself strongly related to creativity. And then conventional agency and organization and institute, and they can obviously, influenced by this digital knowledge at the same time, right? Do you want to take a look? Few of them. Okay, I want to share some sound. This is training module I provided last summer to teacher. This is for the using JavaScript to create the different type of tables. This is using TTS, text-to-speech technology, and item can read out different languages and then they can speak out. And this is how we able to specify distractor in multiple choice and we able to adding diagnostic assessment. And then they provide a different tailored feedback. And this is how we utilizing and after conducting synthetic analysis and developing grammar tests. This is how we adding not only multiple choice, true, false, and filling the blank and matching item, and then display and the multiple format of the item is the one single program. This is how we utilizing the, changing the figures and we primarizing the aspect of the figures and then computer drawing a figure dynamically. This is another 3D figures and then based on Minsky frame perspective and then we able to learn how to program three-dimensional figures. This is Wittgenstein 1921 based on theoretical picture, right? And then we learn how to mapping inference knowledge to the picture, question, inference, and wording thing. And this is also cognitive care, cognitive assessment, item writing techniques. This is another cognitive assessment, and we are utilizing this one as the spatial reasoning. This is another one, and then another cognitive assessment how we able to generating folding question. This is another cognitive assessment how we rotating the figures by program. All right. There's dozens of the training for teacher and the classroom teacher able to, not every teacher in South Korea, I believe their own success rate is, survival rate is only 20%. Right? They studied and only 20% able to survive in this program training, but they're smart enough to do it, right? And then, the whole idea is this: let teacher to let them independent and stronger and agent expertise. This is exactly same as educational expertise development using digital technology. And then we are centered around not learner, we are centered around the teacher. We make teacher stronger to help teacher as a second round. They have an experience of generating knowledge instead of the memorizing knowledge. And then they start to do divergent thinking because they have to change those different features to creating different variation. They have to think about higher level, higher order thinking in order to create rich variation. And then they understand, oh, I can use my knowledge as a tool. It's not a target. No, I want to use knowledge to do this. And then they deepening their knowledge. And then this is extremely high level intellectual pursuit instead of I just memorize and then I deliver the textbook information to students. And they teacher start to be creative and independent in the classroom. They're getting better human. If we have a teacher, they're better human. Our students gets a better human. That's my idea, right? Thank you.